Hello and welcome to Just a Podcast. My name is Just Bob. This time we're going to jump straight in talking about road trips. Having just come off of a road trip the other day, and I mentioned this on the air pretty briefly, but I took a trip up to New Jersey to visit Nitty Gritty, who is working in New Jersey and has been there for a couple weeks and will probably be there for a few more. So wanted to stop up there and spend some time with her, and had the chance to experience some highways that I was not familiar with before, because this is a part of New Jersey that I hadn't been to. Well, I'd been there before, but not in a number. Well, no, this part of this area where we were, I actually had not been there before. I'd been not too far from there, but when I was younger, I guess in the early 2000s, I took a lot of road trips. There was a lot of time when I had nothing going on. So it was like, just jump in the car, take a drive, go somewhere, do something, whatever. I did that a lot, if I had nothing, like if my band wasn't playing on a particular weekend, or if I didn't have to work or whatever it was, just jump in the car, go somewhere. I did that a lot, and it seems like, I was in my early 20s, and you have more free time on your hands. At least you're supposed to. That's the point in your life when you are supposed to. And lately, of course, not the case. You have things to do, you get responsibilities and stuff like that. So oftentimes, road trips are limited to planned out vacations, which is fine. I feel like you need a break out of your routine. There are some people who never take vacations, and I don't understand that. I would go nuts. I would absolutely lose my mind. But for me, you got to get out. You got to break your routine. It's just like a mental reset. But like I said, I used to take trips, highways, just get on the road, go somewhere, just pick a road and just go. You don't even need a set destination. Just keep going till you feel like stopping. Get on a highway and stay on it till you feel like getting off, or get on a road and go straight till you feel like turning. I mean, just whatever. Don't plan. Just do it. Just go, And so this was not exactly like that. I mean, I had a destination in mind, but I was kind of on my own timetable. And once I got there, we really didn't have any plans other than to hang out together. So we just did whatever. And that was great. It was a lot of fun. And I feel like, for me, it's easy to kind of ignore doing things spontaneously. You kind of get into planning. I mean, especially when there's other people involved. You can't have a group of people and just say, okay, let's just go out, do whatever. You can't just do whatever. You got to know what you're doing, because but when it's just you, or it's just you and one other person, you can kind of do that. You can kind of get on the same page. You can have a mind meld, as it were, and just sort of piece it together as you go along, which is fun. And you wind up a lot of times doing stuff you maybe wouldn't have expected. You certainly wouldn't have planned on, which is part of the whole fun of it. And I think there's something to be said for just plunging ahead with no plan and seeing where you wind up. And we did a lot of that in Philadelphia. Drove through some neighborhoods that I've never seen before, and found some pretty cool stuff. We wound up in Center City, just across from the convention center, which is near the Pennsylvania Art. Oh, what is it? Oh, the name is escaping me right now. I'm looking it up on my phone even as I speak. Pennsylvania Academy. The Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. That's it. And if you've never seen this place, It is in Center City, Philadelphia, only a couple of blocks from City Hall. And what caught our attention in driving by was that there is a sculpture of a paintbrush outside and another sculpture of like a dollop of paint on the ground in front of it. And from a distance, it looked exactly like a poop emoji to me. Like, can you imagine that? You're going down the street and then you just see this gigantic poop emoji just sitting there. It made me laugh really hard. So we pulled over and went to check it out. And even though it was almost midnight, I mean, it was late at night, but there was still, the bustling city thing going on and people everywhere. And there was a roving gang of youths who were riding dirt bikes and ATVs down Broad Street at unsafe speeds, which I've never seen there before. I have seen that happen before. When I lived in Baltimore around 2002, 2003, I saw a lot of that. And I saw what can happen if you do that. I was coming home from work one day, and there was it looked like someone had dropped a dirt bike off the roof of a building, because it was just exploded into 1,000 pieces. And there were pieces of this bike strewn all over the road. This is on the very south end of Hillen Road, just before it runs into Harford Road, which is near where my house was. And I found out that what had happened was a young man riding on a dirt bike had a collision with a pickup truck, and the kid on the bike didn't make it, didn't survive, and judging by the condition that what was left of the bike, I mean, seriously, you could not have done a better job dismantling this bike if you'd had like a torch. You know what I mean? Like one of those torch welder deals. I mean, you could not have cut this thing up any more than it was. And no one cleaned it up. This is City of Baltimore. No one cleaned it up. Pieces of that bike were still there a month later. They were still there 6 months later when I moved. I drove by that same location about 2 years later. Pieces of that bike were still there. I'll bet if you go to that spot right now, and at this point it's been 17 or 18 years later, which is a mind blower. I'm going to tell you right now. But I'm sure if you went by that location today, pieces of that bike are still there now, which is, pretty stunning to me. But anyway, we saw these guys riding back and forth, and it was funny because you'd hear them, they'd go by, and it was a bunch of them. It was maybe close to a dozen of them, and they're riding like four-wheelers and stuff you would not expect to see in the city. I've known people that have had four-wheelers, like quad runners and stuff like that, but they lived on, they lived out in the country, places where there's land to ride something like that. In the city, there's really not. So I don't know, that I found that quite puzzling, quite baffling. But so they would ride in and you would hear it. I mean, it was loud, all these engines. And then they would go by, and then they would go down other blocks. And where we were, it was like, you hear them be like, and the sound would grow more and more faint. But you could still hear it. It was loud enough that even blocks away. And then they would go by again, it would get louder and louder and louder, and then they would go by, and then it would get faint again. And this happened 2 or 3 times. And then I don't know what happened. Well, we left. Yeah, we went back to the hotel we were in. But we're staying in New Jersey, outside the city. because it's cheaper, quite frankly. But spent a good bit of time on the highways because getting from where Nitty's work was to where we were going, I mean, it's an hour and plus drive. You know, we weren't in a hurry and just sort of taking whatever route to get there, which is a good thing because in New Jersey there's multiple ways to get just about everywhere, and the popular saying is to get anywhere, it's just a question of what turnpike exit. But that's, I mean, yeah, it's true, but it also suggests that you have to take the turnpike to get places, and you don't. There are options. There are other options. And the only tolls that we paid the entire weekend were on bridges. Because, you know, to get between Jersey and Pennsylvania, you've got to cross the Delaware River, and on every Delaware River crossing going from New Jersey into Pennsylvania, there's a toll. Going from PA to Jersey, there is not a toll, but the other way there is. But on most of the crossings, the tolls are cheap. They're like $1 or whatever. You know, compared to the turnpikes, you know, like the PA turnpike, I have a considerable amount of experience with. I've been on the PA turnpike many, many times, and even going one exit is still can be, you know, like $7 to $10. But the exits, you know, it's not like a regular highway. The exits are pretty far apart. Some of the exits are like, you know, they can be 15, 20 miles apart. On a regular interstate, on average, exits are 3 miles apart. So you could get on the turnpike, get off the next exit, but still travel a pretty good distance. And I wasn't trying to mess around with that. But there are, like I said, there are options. Almost every interstate, there are other roads alongside that you can use that have no toll. Okay, so I've drifted to one other thing about the subject of tolls and turnpikes is we're looking to get a hold of one of those Easy Pass transponders. You know, one of them dealios, you stick it in your window and then you don't have to stop and pay a toll. It's like all done automatically. And that's still on the to-do list. I wanted to get one back when I lived in Baltimore. I commuted through one of the tunnels, depending on traffic, you know, either the Harbor Tunnel or the Fort McHenry Tunnel, and never got around to it. It's just kind of the story of my life, you know, meant to do X, Y, and Z, but never quite got around to it. I think tolls are one of those things people just sort of take for granted, and I think it's one of those things that the various departments of transportation in the various states also take for granted. They just assume that you're gonna fork out the money for the convenience, and most people do. And I'll be honest with you, if I were commuting like that myself, I probably would do the same thing. You know, my sister uses the Dulles Toll Road in Virginia to get to work, and has got a transponder for that. And, you know, it shaves a significant amount of time out of the commute. Yeah, I would do it. I would absolutely do it. You know, right now my commute is very short. You know, it's only a couple minutes, and I spend, I'm on the highway for about 2 miles. So it's not really necessary. But, yeah, wading through all that traffic last weekend, man, it had me thinking, you know, I wonder how many of these people have to deal with this traffic every single day. I'll say the thing that has changed for me in living in a relatively rural area as opposed to living in a major city is if you get out of the city for a few years, you definitely do get spoiled by not having to deal with the traffic all the time. And traffic is one of those things that will make you absolutely crazy, and you do get hardened to it after a while. Commuting through heavy traffic for years and years and years is one of those things that you just you just get used to it, I guess. And once you have had a couple years where you don't have to deal with it, then you go back to it. Like when I drive in a major city, whether it's Philadelphia or Baltimore or Richmond or any of the other big cities that I've traveled through or traveled to in the last few years, the traffic is nerve-wracking. It's nerve-wracking to me now in a way that it never used to be before. And I think that's just because after a while you just, you're not used to it anymore. So it seems like a much bigger thing. It's like I said something about visiting Philadelphia and going through my old neighborhood and realizing that the streets are a lot more narrow than I remember. It's all your perception. The places that I've lived since then, it's a lot bigger, but where I lived as a kid was a real old place, and some of them, the streets were around before cars were around, so they're a lot more narrow. But I recommend that for a good stress reliever, just take a drive, man. Even if you can't go all that far, take a drive and just get out of your headspace for a little bit. I mean, just a change of scenery, just seeing something different outside of the windshield can be enough to improve your mood. I know it has that effect on me a lot. Thanks for joining me for another Just a Podcast. I know these things are a little bit rambling, and I try my best to stay on topic, and I very rarely am successful, but I do appreciate you sticking it out. Join me again next time. Have a good one. Thanks.